Before we get into the case tonight, I want to thank the show's sponsor, BetterHelp, for helping keep the flame lit of the campfire for this episode. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service that's 100% online. So you don't have that awkwardness of sitting in a waiting room with a whole bunch of other strangers waiting to see your therapist. With BetterHelp, you have access to a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with whatever you're dealing with. All you have to do to get started is answer some questions about what your needs and preferences are in therapy. So that way, BetterHelp can match you with a therapist that is right for you. And if you want to change your therapist because maybe you're not comfortable with them, you can change your therapist at any time for no additional charge. You also don't have to wait any specific time or any number of sessions to change your therapist. So when you match up with that right therapist, you can talk to your therapist however is most comfortable for you, whether it's text, chat, phone, or video. You can also message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you and your schedule. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you with more scheduling flexibility and more affordable prices. So if you go to the website and use the show's code, betterhelp.com/CCC, not only does that let them know that you heard it at the campfire, but you'll also receive 10% off your first month. So that's betterhelp.com/CCC. BetterHelp, HELP.com/CCC. And I'll also have a link provided in the show notes. "28-year-old Gretchen Fleming was enjoying a night out after work with a friend after leaving one bar and going to another. Gretchen was enjoying life, trying to figure herself out. Music was a big part of Gretchen's life, and she would always dress in a way to always make some sort of statement in her own creative way, as described by friends. Gretchen didn't have a car or even have her license, saying she didn't need to drive when she could just Uber everywhere. Or one of her friends would drive her, and if she was within walking distance, she would just walk. Gretchen was last seen in the early morning hours of December 4th, 2022, after leaving the My Way Lounge and Restaurant in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Now, her family, friends, and the entire community are seeking the truth behind her disappearance. In a small town where everyone knows everyone, how could someone just vanish without a trace? Come gather around the campfire with me tonight as we look at the timeline and the clues of Gretchen's disappearance, and we follow the trail that leads to just one person. But there's only one problem: the evidence. Welcome to the campfire. Grab your s'mores and grab a seat. Thanks for joining me tonight around the fire, where we discuss the dark world of true crime. This is the Campfire Crime Chronicles, a true crime podcast, and this is the case of Gretchen Fleming. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining me tonight around the fire for this week's case. It was supposed to be last week's case. However, I did not have a voice to conduct a campfire with you guys. So here we are. Gretchen Fleming was just 27 years old when she went missing last year, about 20 days shy of her 28th birthday, which is also Christmas Eve. Gretchen is from Vienna, West Virginia, and she graduated Parkersburg High School. Gretchen's father, David Fleming, and Gretchen were very close, spending a lot of time together, especially after when David and Gretchen's mother divorced. When Gretchen was about 14 years old, David began dating another woman who became Gretchen's stepmother, and the two would also become close as well. After high school, Gretchen didn't really know what to do with her life and was still figuring it out. and she wanted to move to a bigger city, so she would inevitably moved to North Carolina after high school, and while living there, she would meet a guy where the two would start dating for about a year and would inevitably break up, but no one seemed to know why. Gretchen's boyfriend was from Charleston, South Carolina, and the two would move back to Charleston, West Virginia. They were pretty serious for that year that they were dating, and so when they broke up, it came to everyone as a surprise, and no one ever found out why the two actually broke up. After the breakup, Gretchen moves back to Parkersburg to her dad's house, where it was a bit chaotic because Jennifer, Gretchen's stepmother, had two twins of her own, plus Gretchen's sister, plus the child that Jennifer and David had together. This would lead Gretchen to move in with her grandmother. However, her grandmother was very old school and old-fashioned and had rules such as if Gretchen wasn't home by 10 o'clock every night, or that night, then her grandmother would lock the door and she would be on her own until the morning. Knowing this, Gretchen would usually spend nights with her friends if she knew she was going to be out past 10 p.m., which happened pretty regularly. Gretchen's biological mother had cancer and was in the hospital, and Gretchen was the only person who had power of attorney and would have to make the hard decision to take her off life support. On December 3rd, a friend would drop Gretchen off at work. This would also be the same night that Gretchen goes missing. So the following morning, on December 4th of 2022, that friend that dropped Gretchen off at work the night before calls Gretchen's father and stepmother asking if they had seen Gretchen because she was supposed to pick her up after work and she wasn't there. Now, Gretchen's father didn't think anything was too out of the ordinary at this moment in time because Gretchen would commonly go days without responding to her father or just about anyone she was talking to. Either she would forget to charge her phone and her phone would die, or she just wouldn't call them back or text them back until a day or two later, and then she would get a hold of everyone and everything would be fine. But unknowing to her father, not everything was fine. However, the friend picking Gretchen up was a pre-planned thing. So it was pre-planned that Gretchen was going to be picked up by her friend from work and go back to her friend's house after work. So 3 more days go by, and everyone's starting to get suspicious at this point. Then 7 to 8 days after Gretchen goes missing, her father starts looking for her and starts at the bar called the Front Row. He shows the bartender her picture and asks if they had seen Gretchen. That's when the bartender tells him that she was there the previous weekend and that her purse was dropped off about a week ago, the very next day. So David looks in her purse and finds her ID, her cell phone, and credit card. Now the red flags are flying, and this is when David gets worried. David talks to one of Gretchen's friends and finds out that she left the Front Row with a guy and went to the My Way Lounge. He talks to the DJ that was the same DJ the night Gretchen showed up, and there was a mystery guy and remembers them being there. He would tell David that they were there and it was the same guy as she was with at the Front Row, and then eventually the two would leave. Her friends tell Jennifer and David that the guy that she left the Front Row with to go to My Way was a friend of hers named John, but her parents didn't know John. Gretchen would be reported missing on December 12th of 2022, 8 days after she initially goes missing. Immediately, Parkersburg Police Department would begin investigating, calling hospitals, searching in their systems to see if any other officers had any encounter with Gretchen, and would check her Facebook profile to see if she had posted anything recently. Parkersburg Police Department would post a picture on their social media profile on Facebook, and within 24 hours would have over 1,000 shares. When the police share Gretchen's photo, that's when John sees it and reaches out to investigators. John would explain to the investigators that he drove her from Front Row to My Way. When they arrived at My Way, Gretchen had left her purse in John's car. At some point, Gretchen leaves My Way without John, and John looks around for her and couldn't find her, and then leaves to drive around and look for her, thinking she was walking somewhere around town. When John couldn't find Gretchen driving around town, he goes back to My Way to see if she was there waiting for him. When John couldn't find Gretchen, then he leaves and goes home for the night. And then the following day, he goes back to the Front Row to drop off her purse, hoping that Gretchen would be there or return there shortly, since John didn't know where Gretchen lived at the time. So on December 13th of 2022, the My Way Lounge owners messages David Fleming privately on Facebook, offering David to come down to the lounge and watch all the surveillance footage of that night that Gretchen was at My Way. So Jennifer and David head to the My Way Lounge, and they see Gretchen sitting by herself, and John is only a couple seats down, talking to some guys. Then they see this guy appear into the picture coming out of the gambling room. He's standing beside Gretchen and buys her a drink, and then the two of them will go back into the gambling room for about another 30 to 45 minutes. When Mystery Man and Gretchen walk out of the gambling room, he is leaving the My Way Lounge, and Gretchen is following him out. During this time, while Gretchen is leaving, John is in the bathroom and doesn't know or see Gretchen leaving. The surveillance footage then shows Gretchen getting into the guy's car and driving away. At this time, the bar is closing down for the night, and John is looking for Gretchen because he was going to give her a ride home or wherever she was planning on staying that night, and couldn't find her, and that's when John begins to look for Gretchen. So the mystery man at My Way would have a name. The people at the My Way tell Jennifer and David that the guy Gretchen left with was with Preston Pierce, who, according to the employees at the My Way Lounge, Pierce wasn't a regular there, so now everyone is trying to figure out who this Preston Pierce person is. Investigators quickly get a hold of Preston Pierce and question him on the early morning hours of December 13th. Pierce tells investigators that he did leave the bar with Gretchen and that he dropped her off downtown in Parkersburg. According to reports, however, unconfirmed, it was alleged that Pierce dropped Gretchen off at a police station in downtown Parkersburg. But obviously it wasn't a police station because there would be video footage and probably wouldn't be discussing this on a true crime podcast. So investigators begin canvassing the area, looking for any witnesses and possibly any surveillance footage that could give investigators their next lead to finding Gretchen. After gathering multiple video footages around town, they begin tracking Pierce's vehicle and the route that he takes, which shows him and Gretchen heading towards South Parkersburg. Investigators believed they were headed towards Pierce's home. Based on the information gathered by the Parkersburg Police Department, they draft up a search warrant to present to the prosecutor and judge with probable cause to search Preston's homes, vehicle, and storage building. All three search warrants were executed at the exact same time in hopes of finding some sort of evidence that placed Gretchen in either the car, home, storage unit, or any combination of the three. Preston Pierce is by no means a saint. He was a food delivery driver, and so he would have the addresses of where women lived plus their phone numbers and would text these women, harassing and stalking them. He would be blasted on social media about this. From what I was able to find out for myself was that he would message these women, harassing them, telling them what he would want to do with them, either in a non-sexual manner or a sexual manner. This would go on to as so much as fast food or restaurant reviews on Google, or even one of those food review sites like Yelp. He would give the place like a 5-star rating, and he would say something like, oh, the place was clean, the service was fast, and then go on about how the server or the cashier was the most gorgeous, beautiful woman that he has ever seen. And he would do this at every place that he went to. Now, typically, when you're going to review an establishment, you would typically talk about how clean it is or how dirty it is, the service, if it was good, if it was bad, and the food quality. Not particularly what somebody looks like. Unless, of course, they look like they haven't showered for a month and they were rolling around in a pile of garbage, then maybe you might comment on their appearance. So Jennifer Fleming had a friend call her about Preston Pierce, where she went out with him and she woke up in his house with no recollection of how she got there or the events that took place when she got to his house, which presumably means that he drugged her. Investigators gathered forensic and DNA evidence amongst other evidence that they would send out to the state to be examined. On Monday, December 19th, 2022, a vigil was held for Gretchen with 150 in attendance to show support for Gretchen's family. On December 29th, Parkersburg Police Department officially announced Preston Pierce was a person of interest, and on the 31st of December, Parkersburg Police would have Pierce's vehicle as a vehicle of interest, which was a black Nissan Rogue, but did not have the year of the Rogue. I want to thank the show's sponsor, BetterHelp, for helping keep the flame lit of the campfire for this episode. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service that's 100% online. So you don't have that awkwardness of sitting in a waiting room with a whole bunch of other strangers waiting to see your therapist. With BetterHelp, you have access to a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with whatever you're dealing with. All you have to do to get started is answer some questions about what your needs and preferences are in therapy. So that way, BetterHelp can match you with a therapist that is right for you. And if you want to change your therapist because maybe you're not comfortable with them, you can change your therapist at any time for no additional charge. You also don't have to wait any specific time or any number of sessions to change your therapist. So when you match up with that right therapist, you can talk to your therapist however is most comfortable for you, whether it's text, chat, phone, or video. You can also message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you and your schedule. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you with more scheduling flexibility and more affordable prices. So if you go to the website and use the show's code, betterhelp.com/CCC, not only does that let them know that you heard it at the campfire, but you'll also receive 10% off your first month. So that's betterhelp.com/CCC. BetterHelp, HELP.com/CCC. And I'll also have a link provided in the show notes. Chief Board would tell Dateline that Pierce told authorities that he gave Gretchen a ride that evening, and when the video from the lounge was reviewed, it didn't show anyone getting into a car. Preston Pierce said to police that she got out of his car prior to arriving anywhere, but then his story would change and become more inconsistent. After the initial interview with Preston Pierce, Pierce would refuse any further interviews or offer any other information. Through additional footage acquired around the Parkersburg area, the Parkersburg Police Department was able to identify a car that they believed drove towards Preston's residence that night. A black Nissan Rogue 1. There is no license plate on the car, but there is a Pittsburgh Penguins plate frame, and there is also an OBX sticker on the upper right side of the back window, and a Darth Vader sticker on both the left and right sides of the car. The Parkersburg Police Department shared photos of the vehicle with Dateline and also on their social media pages, and was encouraging anyone from the area who had video surveillance on their homes or businesses to review the footage of the night of December 4th and even the hours of December 5th in the evening to see if they saw the black Nissan Rogue 1 driving by their residence or business either of those days. So if we take a closer look at Preston Pierce, because he's such a stand-up citizen of society, Pierce is between 55 and 56 years old, and he actually had his name changed at one point, presumably because of his father, or having something to do with his father. His name used to be Daryl Lott, and then changed it to Preston Pierce, and also has about 8 different aliases. Pierce was also a former cop from Williamstown, West Virginia, as well as other departments, with the last being at the Belington Police Department, which he, according to reports, was let go or fired because of inappropriate conduct. But before this time, he had been a law enforcement officer over the course of 12 years. Now, I attempted to reach out to the Belington Police Department to confirm these allegations. However, they had not responded back to me, at least at the time of this podcast. So while Pierce was Daryl Eugene Lott, he would claim bankruptcy while he was with Christine K. Lott, which I'm assuming is an ex-wife. In April of this year, he had a judgment against him for just over $7,400 to Safeco Insurance Company of Illinois, which was filed in Wood, West Virginia. And this is under the name of Preston Pierce. At some point, Pierce had left Parkersburg during the investigation to try to take some of the heat off of him and went to Martinsburg, West Virginia. However, Pierce would return to Parkersburg and be spotted on the 18th of October, probably assuming that he could return to quote-unquote life without constantly being questioned about Gretchen's disappearance. But this isn't some parking ticket that people are going to forget about. This is a missing person that you have some sort of involvement with, and also more than likely involvement in her disappearance. So another fun fact about Preston Pierce is that he lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina and Eastern North Carolina between March 1st of 2011 and May 30th of 2014. So now I don't have the exact time frame of when Gretchen was in North Carolina, so this is merely speculation. So if we base the timeline of her in North Carolina after high school, then assuming she went immediately after high school would be somewhere around 2013. And it could be as late as about 2020. So if she was down there in 2013, it is possible by a mere slight possibility that Preston Pierce had either A, seen her, or B, had met her and striked up conversation because he is attracted to younger women, and used the commonality of being from West Virginia as the conversation piece. Now, I don't have any hard evidence or verification of this, so this is all speculation and take it as you will. In early January 2023, a news agency reported that remains of Gretchen were found on the Ohio River. Now, Parkersburg sits on the Ohio River, so the family was filled with confusion, wondering why Detective Zimmerman hadn't contacted them about this and couldn't figure out what happened. So they called Detective Zimmerman, and he would tell David that he was just as ambushed about it as David was, and was traveling to find out what was going on and would fill him in on the details as he found out. Detective Zimmerman would find out that the description of the person of the remains that were found were actually not that of Gretchen, and it was false reporting by the news agency. Jennifer was furious, as one would expect, and sent a nasty email to the reporter who wrote the article, which the reporter failed to do any due diligence and research and just looked for a story to gain a quick hype. Investigators would receive a tip in early January that her body could have potentially been placed in a well in Ravenswood, West Virginia. Detective Zimmerman would assemble a crew and company to go out and drain the well that was located in Ravenswood. And guess who also had a residence at one time in Ravenswood? Our very own person of interest, Preston Pierce. However, Detective Zimmerman's efforts and search would yield no results, nor were there any signs of Gretchen. With what available resources I've had access to these past couple of weeks, I wasn't able to find any criminal records on either Preston D. Pierce or Daryl Eugene Lott, which isn't unexpected since he had been an officer, and you obviously cannot be a police officer if you have a criminal background. At least not any federal criminal records. So in February of this year, a large community-wide search of over 500 people was commenced starting at Mountwood Park, which is also in close proximity of Pierce's residence. Mountwood Park is a national park of a large acreage about 30 minutes east of Parkersburg. The search would turn up nothing, but Detective Zimmerman kept a watchful eye on any human remains that were found by other agencies and jurisdictions, and would follow up with those agencies to rule out that they weren't Gretchen's. There's no evidence of Gretchen being deceased. However, it's something to consider, and investigators don't want to dismiss it, which is good on their part. By June of this year, it had been nearly 6 months, or a little over 6 months, since Gretchen had disappeared, and there were still no signs of Gretchen or a body. Speculation is that maybe she was sold off to the sex trade, which does go through West Virginia, and then you have those who believe that she was murdered, and they just haven't found the body yet. I'm leaning less towards sex trade and more towards murder, and they just haven't found the body yet. I'm going to keep investigating this case and keep my efforts remaining to reaching out to the Belington Police Department as well as Parkersburg Police Department for updates. And as updates come out, I will post updated episodes about the case. If you have any information about Gretchen's case, contact Detective Zimmerman at 304-424-1072 or the Parkersburg Police Department directly at 304-424-8444 and reference case number P2207164. And this will all be in the show notes. Gretchen is between 5 foot and 5 foot 2 inches tall and weighs 100 to 120 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes, and she is now 28 years old and will be 29 on Christmas Eve. That concludes this case at the campfire. I know there's more information I didn't include in this story as there was a lot of information to cover. All resources used to gather the information for the case include, but not limited to, news articles, reports, documentaries, as well as other sources. I appreciate everyone who has gathered by the campfire with me for this case. I appreciate all the support from all the listeners and supporters. Word of mouth is the best support for the show, so tell your friends, family, coworkers, the guy next to you in a coffee line, or someone you meet at a bonfire that you go to this fall. Don't forget to check out the bonfire over at Patreon, where you can find bonus episodes, sneak peeks at the next case that I'm working on, and also you'll get a shout out on the podcast when you sign up. Also, if you wish to support the show but not necessarily sign up for a subscription, you can support the show with the S'mores Fund through the website CampfireCrimeChronicles.com. A link will be provided in the show notes. Check out the merchandise store where you can find t-shirts, hats, mugs, and hoodies for this fall as you're sitting around your own campfire. Links will be provided in the show notes for the merch store. Don't forget, wherever you're listening, to rate the show 5 stars. It helps the show up and be seen by everyone on the podcast apps. So join me next time in 2 weeks as we gather around the campfire for the next case that we get into. Remember to sleep with one eye open. I'm your host, Kevin, and this is the Campfire Crime Chronicles, a true crime podcast.